podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV or social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories and listen to what real people think, do or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. So here today we have Astrid Davies, and we're going to talk about change and confidence. Hi Astrid, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Sophie. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for coming on. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yep, I'm a change agent, worked in private, public and voluntary sectors, and I have been leading high-performing teams for a number of years, but also having to change them, having to transform them as the economic landscape meant that we were a bit shorter of cash, all of us. So I have experienced change and have led change, and one of the things that I always pride myself on is that folk feel they have a stake in it, and I'll come back to that point in a bit.
So just so that everybody kind of is on the same page, to you, what is change?
Change is defined in umpteen different ways. I choose to use the definition of, very simply, doing things differently.
Yeah, that sums it up quite well, to be fair. Why do you think that is, that people don't necessarily like change?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to say that they don't like change, and I think that's largely because they don't understand it. Mm-hmm. And that's because change is sold as a negative. It's sold as a bad thing. But actually, we have the idiom, change is as good as a rest. Sometimes change can be a positive, but it depends. It often depends on whether you're the person who's doing the change or whether the change is being done to you.
Yeah.
And that is the same in the workplace or in the home.
Yeah. So just to explain what we mean, if you decide to get another job and leave, or being made redundant, or whether you decide to leave a relationship or you're the person being left.
Indeed.
Why do you think certain people really struggle with that? Is it the lack of control? Is it the fact that all of a sudden something is taken away and they didn't want it to happen that way? It had to be on their terms and it's not on their terms?
I think that there are lots of different reasons that people struggle with change. I think the reason that I divide change into largely those two groups are the folk that are keener on change are the ones who are driving it, mm-hmm. and the ones who are less keen are the ones who are having it driven at them. They're having it done to them. And I think when folk are keen, they are wanting the change, they will feel that they have control. They will have a sense of commitment to the change. They have made the decision to do the change. They are feeling brave because they're taking that decision. Their self-efficacy is one of the words they use in academia about it. They feel able to drive that change for themselves and they feel confident to do so. None of that is guaranteed to apply to the ones that feel that it's being done to them.
Actually, as you say that, it makes me think of a little story where a friend of mine works for a company where they kind of force change on the staff in such a way. I just would like to get your views on it, shall we say. So they believe in paperless environments. So anybody should be able to work from wherever. And if someone turns up, they can just work. So no one's got their own desk. No one's got to leave anything overnight or anything like that. So let's just say, that you're working on the second floor somewhere in an area. Well, within a week of starting working there, most people are going to sit with who they want and they're going to have the same desk day in, day out. And this particular company, every 6 months, changes them to a different part of the building. So you might just stand up on the ground floor somewhere in a completely different environment. And people hate it. And they are really not productive because we've got to adjust to that every 6 months, and it's very unsettling. And personally, I find that counterproductive.
Yes. Yeah, I agree completely. I am bemused by that leadership approach. I think that if change is inflicted
for no apparent reason,
random change. I mean, change that has a cause and has a purpose, and it's a shared purpose, that gives people a stake, a feel of skin in the game. If they don't understand the purpose of it, it's probably communicated to them in quite a parental way, and I'll come back to what I mean by parental in a bit. And also they just think it's a bit kind of vindictive because they've got settled and their gonk is and their pot plant and the picture of the kids is all in the corner of the desk. They'll feel like it's petty, and pettiness, you lose people quick as quick. Now, when I was talking about parental, what I'm meaning in terms of transactional analysis, there is a parent ego state, there's an adult ego state, and there's a child ego state.
Actually, fair point. Explain what each of these stages are, because people may not know.
No, absolutely. Well, if people are operating in parent state, that company, for instance, it's a top down. They are treating the employees as if they're children, because they're organizing them as if they have no stake, as if their opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That may well have triggered a child response, which is how very dare you, I'll show you, kind of response, right? What you and I do when we work with our clients is we work on that middle state, and that is the state that's based on evidence, and that's the adult. And what we're trying to do is help people. What I do when I work with clients is I'm working with people to get them into the most resourceful state, the state in which they feel most confident, where they feel happiest. And that's going to be that adult to adult state. Now, it's not adult as in XXX, don't panic, but it is an adult-based viewpoint that's based on evidence. What is going on right now? And that people will notice. And they'll notice what's going on. They'll notice that they see people are unhappy. They'll notice these edicts coming down from on high. And what will happen there is that there will be a disconnect between the people who are doing the leading, allegedly, and the people who are being led, who will stop wanting to be led. I mean, let's be clear. You cannot be a leader if people don't want to be led.
No.
You end up just managing them, and that's a different thing.
And I think that's the problem in a lot of companies. They kind of do this sort of stuff. I don't know, sometimes it's just like, I don't quite get it, but I do. I think it's because they've got an idea, and instead of trying to get people on board and saying their idea, they've got it in their head that people are going to be against it anyway, so they might as well just force it onto them. And you end up in situations where there's a conflict, where the employees completely, as you said, disconnect from the company, but even go to leave and find other employment where actually they would have been quite happy to. And one of the things that I hear or heard a lot when I was doing some work with corporates is, you're just a number here.
And that is that's a heartbreaker for those of us who try and work to support organisations through change, because if you have a workforce who feel like they're just automatons, they're just numbers, they're robots, could be robots, no one cares, no one knows their name, it means that someone quite senior has made a choice to ignore their validity, to ignore their viewpoint, and that's just shameful way to behave. If people feel like they are a number, but they understand that there is a reason for them being treated as a collective for a very short period of time for a very specific purpose, and that purpose has been communicated to them. For instance, if everybody is in a pool and they're being made redundant, they will have to have the same HR1 notice or whatever. Yeah. That is understandable, but it's only understandable if there has been effective communication. Now, I'm really keen on the verb to notice and the verb to listen and the verb to communicate. But communicate is not just bleh and speaking out. It is that the fifth habit of Covey, which is seek first to understand.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, going back to, I know we're not really talking about like personal relationship and personal change at the moment, but I think it's important to say that for companies, I recall some where they have like, oh, what do they call it? National consultative or something along those lines, where
Nice.
it isn't actually a consultation whatsoever. It's a tick the box exercise, and I'm making people feel like their opinions are heard, and they're not. You're just there to just be there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is one of the areas where people do feel like they're just a number if they're being consulted at.
Yeah.
If you have, if you're in receipt of a consultation and there is no consultation that listens to your personal point of view, then at best it's window dressing and at worst it's propaganda. The point of an effective consultation, and again, you know, change management is part of a project management discipline, and that a part of my world is always looking at, in my language, stakeholders, everybody who's affected by the change. It could be the person who's driving the change and sponsoring it. It could be the people who are being done to. It's the people who might benefit as a result of the change. Everybody who has a stake in that change needs to be heard. It does not mean that the change needs to be zooming around like a pinball, changing tack every 5 seconds.
Well, a change of change, the sake of
Exactly.
change.
You have to have a plan, but it doesn't mean to say that that plan has to be a steamroller. There has to be some nuance. There has to be something that gets people to feel heard. And sometimes that can be the big picture, big ticket item. Sometimes it can just be, it's okay. You can keep that parking space for another week. It's fine.
I actually got an example where I was, because I was deemed a troublemaker when I was employed. So I was always ending up on these things because they knew that if it wound me up enough, I would come out and say, you know, what I had to say. And I recall one particular, it's to show, because this is years ago, we're talking maybe 12 years ago, where I used to run a security fleet of vehicles, and at night they'd go out there, they'd respond to alarms, they would lock up buildings and unlock them in the morning. Long story short, there was a freak winter where they could have really done with some blankets and some snow shovels or whatever, and they didn't. So what we did is that we ended up not going out at all. So we didn't respond to any alarms. We had to, you know, credit all the lockups and locks we didn't do, blah, blah, blah. So it lost money in essence. Now, I'm not saying that we should, you know, send people out there in blizzards and health and safety conditions, that whatever. But the following year, about 2 weeks before the beginning of winter, I voiced my concern over the fact that for what it costs to have a shovel in a car and a blanket, it wouldn't go amiss. It was poo-pooed like, you know, this was a freak winter. It's not going to happen again. Guaranteed. What happened 2 weeks later? One of my guys got stuck in the snow. And it's something that's silly, but it kind of really got my back up, because for the cost involved, even if it was never to be used, at least they would have had the security officers, you know, feeling like they were looked after. Just for the sake of, like, let's call it 20 quid for a snow shovel and a blanket.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is that's, it's not just poor engagement with the workforce, but it's poor short-sighted leadership.
Yeah.
If an organization isn't planning for eventualities. Yeah. I mean, you know, in change we talk often, we use the marvelous academic Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, we use her change curve. That starts with denial. So when you were introducing a potential change to your line management, Sophie, all they were hearing was la, 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 because they were in denial.
Yeah.
And then the next stage after denial on this curve can be fear, anger, and pushback, resistance. Now, all of those things I am hearing because they're scared of money. They're getting cross with you for rocking the boat. They're pushing back, saying it's no, it's not going to be the same this winter. Yeah, all of those things. And this is, you know, they're just a group of folk who are being silly and short-sighted with the budget. It's poor planning. But that's also a failure to embrace change. You remember I was saying about the people who are driving the change and the people who are done to, there is an assumption that the change is always top down. Sometimes the change can be bottom up.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, it's coming up from the workforce to the leadership, and the leadership
listens.
Oh, right. And they may listen or they may not. And if they don't, they'll be caught out. Or worse, the workforce are caught out. And if their workforce are caught out because they know that the management didn't listen, woo, that's a problem.
Yeah. And I think the thing as well, if you take personal relationships, change has an impact on others. So that could be as simple as, someone leaves a relationship and obviously someone's being left. So there's going to be an impact on family, on children, if there are any, that sort of stuff. But even a single person change, they've met someone. That's a change again for all those that know them, whether it's a friend that all of a sudden doesn't see them as often, all of that. And depending on how that goes, you can bring confidence with it, or quite the opposite. They're going down that dip of that curve change that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I absolutely. And one of the things, I was saying about communication and seeking first to understand and then be understood.
Yeah.
That piece about understand what's going on for yourself and then understand what's going on for other people.
The other person. Yeah.
And it's not about bending to their will or doing what they want. It's just acknowledging what's going on for them. And they may be being fair or they may be being unfair, but it's about understanding what you yourself need, what is good for you, what is in your interest. Now, what is in your interest does not mean that it's always the fun or the easy thing.
And obviously there's it's not an obvious example, but for me it's obvious. If, for instance, in a marriage, the husband, shall we call him, is employed, doing a job he enjoys, whatever, salary comes in same day every month, and then the wife, for whatever reason, let's just say the kids have grown up or she decided she's had enough and she wants to start a business of some description. And off she goes. Obviously, it's a massive change at the beginning because it's different hours, it's different everything. But the problem is that she's going to start meeting, and I know that, not that I was married at that point when I started, but you end up in different circles. You open up to things that you never knew existed. The first time I went to a networking event at 6:30 in the morning, having breakfast, I'm thinking, and all these years, I never knew these things happened kind of in secret at the back of hotels somewhere, But then you opened up to new ideas that you never heard of, because you were cocooned in an environment of work, of a company. Before I started networking, I never heard of the word coach. I thought it was a bus.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is a massive change that comes with anything like, we've talked before about the change from going from an employed situation to a self-employed situation. In your example there, where the wife is making a change, if she has not talked to her husband, she doesn't know whether the husband actually was thinking, this job is killing me, I've got to leave. So she's assuming that he's going to be keeping going with the funds for the holidays or the kids at university or whatever. And she's kind of taking that for granted. Whereas he is taken for granted that she's always going to be there and he can come home at 5 o'clock and tea's going to be on the table. And then all of a sudden she's at an evening networking event, LinkedIn local or whatever, and she's nowhere to be seen. Where the hell? So that is a classic example where change in the domestic situation can go really badly wrong through no one's bad intent. It's just because folk didn't communicate. You and I both are.
And the thing as well is that they can end up on completely different life paths because, if we go back to this particular example, the wife is now learning all sorts of new and different things. And, and then all of a sudden she turns around and she realizes that the friends haven't followed because they're not getting it at all. They're still in the kind of environment. The husband's not followed either. And no one's really kind of getting it. And then there's that sometimes wanting to force that onto people who are not getting it and not wanting to get it either.
Yeah. And that is about it can be negotiation and influence skills. but also there is a tipping point where confidence goes through sort of a bravado kind of performance and ends up in hubris. And that's the bit where you're overconfident, you don't actually believe in it, but you're going to keep on trucking. And that is a really dangerous place from which to introduce change, and certainly from which to drive change. Confidence is great because you're committed, you're up for this, you know you can do it. Bravado, there's a little bit of covering for yourself. By the time you're over in hubris, you're in the territory of well-known international leaders. You know, carrying on regardless. That isn't effective change. You know, Colin Powell once said that if soldiers stop bringing you their problems, they either don't think you care or they don't think you can solve them, and either one is a failure of leadership. I would suggest that applies to change too, because what you're talking about is bringing change to a situation where you just thought about your own self and you didn't think about other people. Back to that stakeholder piece in the workplace, just the same in your own domestic situation.
Yeah, because it has an impact. We don't always see the ripples that a simple or so-called simple decision will have. And obviously change can then trigger confidence or doubts or even both.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does mean that people feel that they are exposed and they've been abandoned and that no one loves them anymore or any of that. Well, actually, they've made choices. And this is the point. They've taken decisions that have taken them down a path that was more singular than other people in their family or friendship group were prepared for. Now, it could be that folk thought it was a bad idea. Or it could be they thought it was a brilliant idea. They just wish they'd known.
Yeah. And if we go back to what we're talking about at the beginning and the change when it's like done to you, what's really important as well is your own self-talk.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I think that the self-talk is the most important piece in this, because it's understanding what's going on for other people and letting that inform what's going on for you, and understanding that you're okay, that your opinion is valid, but so is other people's. And it's about maintaining that balance. And it's about maintaining that balance in confidence, knowing that you can do stuff. And sometimes when you do little things, little wins, like that, you know, keeping the parking space for an extra week that I was talking about earlier, it's a nasty phrase, but the micro successes is one of the jargony pieces. Those little quick wins where folk can feel that they've just got a little bit of a plus out of this situation. Sometimes that is all it needs to start the huge flywheel of the energy in this change to actually start moving. And when people start to feel more confident, they then put more commitment into it. They'll then feel that their capability, they
own it. Quite
literally. Absolutely owning it, their ownership, all of that will come together, and then their competence will boom, and then their confidence will boom. And that will happen if they're driving the change, or if they're being the change is being driven at or to them. The key point is that they need to acknowledge that they've got those successes and to not forget it. Don't discount success. And that self-talk is huge in both halves.
And I think that one of the things as well with change is that one of the reasons what people don't want it, take COVID, for instance, it was put onto us. You know, there was nothing we could really do. We could not have predicted that a year ago. We would, you know, if it said, the entire world's going to shut down for 4 months and you have to all wear masks to go in a shop and queue like back in the day, no one would have believed that in a million years. You know, when you think Greenpeace and all these organizations have tried to ground planes by, you know, sellotaping themselves to them or whatever, and they haven't, and all of a sudden here comes Mother Nature, we're going to ground the planes for you. Yeah. But the thing with change is, as you were saying earlier, with the will, you know, we often think that we don't want things to change. We want it to stay as they are, but nothing stays as it is because, you know, a flower grows or dies. Water, if it's stagnant, it won't stay as nice, clear water. It'd be minging and mouldy. And We've got to understand it's the same for us. You know, if we don't change, we die inside.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You know, the change is the only constant. We bandy around as, you know, as people in the 21st century. That phrase appeared in the classical world 2000 years ago. Change has always been with us. You know, Einstein said, when you stop learning, you start dying. There is something about keeping change, doing things differently, learning new things. That's what I mean by change. When we start to understand the importance of change in keeping us happy, keeping us healthy. You know, through lockdown, people have started to value nature, appreciate nature, because they're physically walking out in it more for their legal hour walk a day. All that stuff is doing things differently. That's change, and it's wholesome, happy, healthy change. A grim reason, but some of those changes will last, and people will still build those into their working day and their working behaviors. You know, working from home will still be an option for some. For others, it's been a complete punishment. But for some, that will then become a broadening part of their work, their home, and it's a way that they can manage things in a different way.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the thing with change, once we've gone through that curve, is moving on until the next wave of change hits you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you go through the acceptance part, which is down the bottom of the curve, you then start picking up, and you're into openness to new ideas. You start trying them out and test them. You then start learning to do new things, and then that starts to be assimilated into how you do what you do, the whole kind of unconscious competence stuff. And by that stage, you're probably ready on your curve for the next change. But that's fine, because you've got all that extra learning. And when your brain learns to do new things and you get confident about that, it starts telling your brain, okay, you can do this now. And your brain starts thinking, oh, I quite like these endorphins. I quite like these positive vibes. I want a little piece more of that. And you start becoming more open to change the more you embrace the change that is going on around you. And that happens whether it's being driven to you, at you, or whether you're actually in the driving seat.
And sometimes, to be fair, by circumstance. I think if I look at myself, when I started the journey of self-employment, if you'd said to me, oh, you're going to write a blog, you're going to write a book, oh, by the way, you're going to be editing podcasts and videos, I would have just looked at you and go, you are? That's not what I'm going to do. That's not what I know how to do. And, you know, I mean, I had to chuckle because it seems like my real job is not what I do, is marketing. And I've even had some marketing agencies approach me to ask me how I do it. And you just think, that's not what I signed up for. And yet it was part of that. And because I've gone with it and followed the change, because otherwise it just wasn't an option to carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is part of that confidence in change piece about, you know, you committed to the self-employment, you took that brave step, you took that brave decision, and because of that you've then started, by necessity, acquired these new skills. But because you've acquired the new skills, that has then bred its own confidence. And it isn't, and maybe at the start you were in that bravado space like all of us are when we're starting the social media marketing, and I'm thinking, oh my life, how do I do this? But then it becomes confidence because you build your competence. And those two are a self-feeding cycle, which is, you know, can really help you to master change and then drive change in a different way, because change isn't a linear thing. It's a zigzag, crazy, nutty, all over the place zigzag. That means that you can choose the direction of your zigzag.
Yeah. Well, Astrid, we're getting towards the end of our time, believe it or not. Any final pearl of wisdom?
What I would say that is crucial to maintaining or developing confidence in change, whether it be workplace or home, is know what's going on for yourself.
Yeah.
That verb, to notice, that I was talking about earlier. making sure what's going on for yourself, making sure that you are, as you say, self-aware, making sure you know what's going on for you in a thought. What are you actually thinking? What are you actually feeling? What emotions are occurring to you? How your body is feeling, whether you're feeling stressed, whether you're feeling in pain, whether you're feeling elated, noting those down. Because when you are confident and you have done stuff and you have actually achieved stuff, and that is a real positive, keeping a note of that is hugely powerful as an affirmation for when you then maybe not having such a great day, and you look at that and you think, actually, hell yeah, I did that. And that is a very important part of your own mastery of your own change, and also your own mastery of your own self-confidence.
Yeah, right. Astrid, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. If you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, and more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.